Hello everyone, and welcome back to the segment where I teach you how to be a better musician by using my own mistakes. This one is going to be a bit more of a technical talk than these mistakes videos usually end up being. This time we're going to talk about mistakes I've made learning how to produce my own music. Originally this was just going to be one video, but I think I've come up with enough material to stretch this lesson out over a few of these, because this is obviously a topic that I have a lot to share. A wide array of successes and failures that you can use to improve your own experience while you're learning how to produce yourself too. So I think the very first mistake that I ever made in this regard is buying the wrong gear to start out with. It's my opinion that beginners, or at least hobby-level recorders and producers, should start out with recording their audio into their computer through a USB audio interface. Before I was hip to this whole setup, I definitely spent a lot of time and a lot of money chasing around these other solutions that didn't exactly work the best for me. It's probably not as common anymore, but about 20 years ago, it was a pretty commonplace for people to just go down to their local music store and to buy some sort of a hardware recording console. I spent about $500 on mine back in the day. It was like an 8-track Tascam digital recorder. And I mean, as far as sound quality and all that goes, it was a pretty decent unit. But for a beginner who doesn't know anything about editing audio or recording or anything like that, the interface on these older hardware units are a lot more limiting. There's a lot bigger of a learning curve for entry-level producers. So that's a big reason why I recommend for beginners, you just start out producing on a computer, on a desktop. Because you can see a visual representation of what you're recording, you can easily just select parts of the audio, copy, paste, drag, drop. All of these older hardware-style units can do the same job, of course. It's just the interface is not as user-friendly, and the interface is not as set up for visual learners. Then once I actually did start recording on a computer, it was my first inclination to get the cheapest setup that I possibly could. I was already using just like the simplest, cheapest Hewlett-Packard laptop that you could go and buy off of a shelf in Walmart. The audio interface that I got was the cheapest one you could possibly get through Guitar Center. And of course, you kind of get what you pay for with this stuff, so obviously I had some issues starting out. The main issue being the latency, which is the time that it takes between when you strike a chord on your guitar and when your computer records that chord into its memory. On a fast computer, this should be pretty much so instantaneous. You shouldn't notice that there's any sort of a delay. But on a cheaper computer, and especially with cheaper sound gear, you're going to notice a lot more latency. So that was the issue why my cheap laptop didn't really work for all of this. I don't think there was anything too wrong with my cheap audio interface that I had back then. In fact, I still have it, and I plugged it in a few months ago, and it actually still works just fine. And that brings us to our next most important piece of gear, which is, of course, the microphone. You can't record anything without a good microphone, and you have to use the right microphone for the right job, which kind of segues into my next big point here, my next mistake that I've made. So the main types that are widely used in music production are dynamic microphones or condenser microphones. A dynamic microphone is like your most basic on-stage vocalist kind of microphone, while the condenser is sort of like what I'm using to record this video. It requires a little extra boost of what they call phantom power, which is an extra 48 volts, which helps the amplification of the signal going into your microphone before it reaches the main amplification stage. So of these two types of microphones, there are obviously many different kinds that you can choose from. As long as you aren't cheaping out and getting the absolute cheapest possible microphone you can afford, then you're probably going to be doing alright as far as mic choice goes. The more basic ones will get you started. You'll probably want to upgrade as you go. Just getting kind of a generic large diaphragm condenser mic will be a pretty good choice for just an all-around recording mic if you can only afford one. I'll use it for guitar, I'll use it for vocals, I'll use it for a lot of different situations. So if you just need one that's kind of versatile, get a condenser mic and get kind of a bigger one. So the next big mistake that I made was the volume at which I record my tracks. when you first start recording yourself, you just kind of record and then whatever happens, happens, right? So I think it was my tendency to record everything really, really quiet. I would get done with a recording session, I would look at the resulting waveforms, and they'd just be like these little teeny tiny skinny waveforms. No girth, no power to them at all. You'd have to amplify each one by like 20 decibels or more just to get it audible in a mix. And recording at that low of a volume, you're really missing out on a few key things tonally. You're missing out on your microphone and your preamp's sweet spot. Your gear will perform better if it is in the right kind of volume range, the right sort of gain staging. And remember that term, the gain staging. That's going to be some pretty important stuff. It's a pretty important concept. I'm not going to go too in-depth with it here, but remember that all of your audio gear has sort of an operating range that it likes to be in. If you send too little audio into it, it's not going to sound quite full or rich or harmonically detailed enough. If you send too much audio into it, then it's going to clip the signal. You're going to get stuff that's distorted, harsh, too much treble, and it could also cause damage to some of your audio gear even if you send too much signal into it. So knowing the right amount of volume for each piece of gear is very important stuff. It doesn't matter if at the end of your chain it all comes out the volume that you want it to be. If somewhere back further in the chain you just have something just dialed all the way up to 12, and then later on the chain you just turn everything down really quiet to make up for it, and then the plug that you have going into your computer, then you just turn that up to the right volume. That's not really the proper way to go about it. So the right volume for each piece of gear. Just as a general rule, like just generally where should I set my volume while recording, you just want to make some test recordings. You want to get your instrument out and you want to just bang on it as hard as you possibly can into your mic, and then take a test recording, see if it clips anywhere, adjust the volume up or down. I like to make sure that my sounds have a lot of presence and volume, but still leaving about 6 decibels of headroom or so. And the last mistake that I'm going to cover in this video is chasing fancy software. Ever since I started, I've used many different programs to produce my audio, and I've settled on some that I kind of like at this point. And the results are probably not what you'd expect. I didn't decide that I want to use Pro Tools for the rest of my life, or Ableton Live, or anything like that. All of these high-end, high-price tag DAWs, they can do wonders for your creative workflow. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind about that. I say that pretty much so any DAW, and I'm even including Audacity in this, even the free programs, will still record a wave sound from your computer's audio interface at a certain sample rate and a certain bit depth. They all do this job exactly the same way. The track recording is much more dependent on what kind of microphones you're using and what kind of interface you're using. If the preamps inside of your interface are good, the actual task of software recording the sound does not change that much from DAW to DAW. Audacity does this job just the same as Pro Tools does. So the main difference here is really the editing environment. You just find the software that you like to use that makes the editing easier for you. The one that has the features that you like. The ones that come built in with all of the effects that you want to use. The ones that have VST support that you like. It's all really just a matter of personal preference once you get past recording the track. So just pick one that you like and then just stick with it. Okay, we're going to wrap this one up. I'd like to thank you all for sticking around and watching the entire video. It would be super awesome of you if you could subscribe to the channel and if you could like this video. Every little bit of engagement is useful for me as far as playing the algorithm and getting my channel monetized sooner. And on that note, while I'm waiting for YouTube to deem me worthy for monetization, I have started a Patreon. So if any of you are feeling generous enough to support me on that platform, I would really greatly appreciate it. All of the proceeds will go towards making the channel and my content even better for you to enjoy. I'm really new over there. I just started a few days ago. I got a video that explains to you what Patreon is and why I joined in the first place, and I'll provide a link to that down below. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.